Welcome to Our Town, a 30-minute podcast brought to you by Best Bark Communications, a small but fierce client-centered marketing company powered by decades of experience and well-established business networks.
This is Andy Ockershausen, and this is Our Town, and our special guest today is a man I've known for many years. He is the president. His name is Kurt Erickson. He's the president of a nonprofit group that I'm extremely familiar with called the Washington Regional Alcohol Program, or RAP. And RAP is here, a lot of reasons for it, but one of them is WMAL, thank you. And Kurt, thank you, and welcome to Our Town.
Well, Andy, thanks for having us, but you're underplaying your role with both me and the organization and the fact that you've long been on our board of directors and a valued member, but you were also there at our founding, as we were just talking about 1982, and that when I came on board in 1999, I know you were instrumental in terms of me sitting in the very seat that I'm in right now. Which is head of a whopping 3-person organization, but nonetheless a very
with enormous clout. I know
well,
that
I appreciate
we
you saying
have
that.
clout. Well, one of the reasons you're here is because Janice Ockershausen, who is the chief domo and the one responsible for bringing Our Town back to life, said that this guy is a dynamo and he's doing something for the lung. He did something for the American Lung Association, American Lung.
Yeah, so Janice and I connected back in the 80s, which sounds very long ago, on a promotion that was, I used to headed up the American Lung Association in Northern Virginia, and one of their big fundraisers that raised about $250,000 a year was an effort to sell golf outings to folks, but not in the traditional way of having a golf tournament on the proverbial Monday. It was an actual card that we worked with 30, 40, 50 golf courses that would donate their greens fees and allow you to play there for free if you bought a cart. It was a great promotion, and Janice was instrumental in its success in getting the word out on it because, again, it was a small nonprofit, but again, brought in $250,000 annually to fight lung disease.
The effort was great. The result was great, but the greatest thing I found out of that effort was to find you and to recommend you through Janice to RAP as a leader, a man who's going to make this outfit go places. And Kurt, you have done that. For Washingtonians that don't know what RAP is, they're missing something because this is a great organization.
Well, I appreciate you saying that's very kind, and maybe it is worth saying what it is. So RAP,
it is.
We're saying RAP, but it stands for the Washington Regional Alcohol Program, which is a 34-year-old public-private partnership formed to fight drunk driving and underage drinking. And I think if people know us at all, they know us through a free cab ride service that we've done since 1993 called Sober Ride, and of which
huge success,
of which 65,000 Washington area residents have taken advantage of just in the last 23 years that we've been offering it.
Well, and they may be 65,000 people could be injured or something, but they took advantage of an offer and they saved their life. Maybe they saved someone else's.
Oh, I think that's the way to look at it, that it's not just for their benefit, but
others.
It's for everybody else's benefit that's sharing the roadways with them.
That's so true.
I mean, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration says that a third of drunk driving victims are non-intoxicated motorists, non-intoxicated occupants in motor vehicles, and non-intoxicated pedestrians. It's just so random in its impact.
Well, I want to get back and we'll talk about the let's say the birth of RAP, but I want to find out more about Kurt Erickson. You were born in Boston and you went to Radford University. And what are you doing here in Washington? Why are you here? Didn't you go back to New England?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, first of all, it's cold in New England. And two is that we actually moved down here as a child, as a family.
Your family
move.
came down?
Right, in 1970 to be exact. So I feel very much of a Washingtonian. So clearly
you're part of our town, Kurt.
4/5 of my life, like most Washingtonians in a transient community as this is based in Washington.
And you went to school here? You went to higher education
Yep,
here?
Went to school right in Virginia as well, and my jobs have pretty much in the greater Washington area. The Lung Association was a 10-year stint and did lung disease and asthma and anti-tobacco efforts, specifically in Virginia. So think about that in the 80s of working against tobacco use and consumption in a state that has actually tobacco leaves both on its flag and on its state dome, on its capital. And then
tobacco fueled the state, no question
it did.
about
It doesn't anymore, but it certainly did at that point. And then translating that into the work that I do right now, it's very what they have in common, the common denominator, is that they're both prevention, and they both have a youth component to it, especially tobacco, where I think the adage holds true to this day that if you can keep somebody from ever smoking and they get to 18, 21 years of age,
they won't do it.
They won't do it. Nobody picks up smoking when they're 25 or when they're 30 or 35. They pick it up when they're younger. So it's in the same way with underage drinking, that if you can delay the onset of drinking until 21, you'll actually have a significant impact on reducing the dependence on alcohol.
And you've also got the problem with the parental drinking and young people, but that's a different. We'll get into that. I want to find out more about Kurt Erickson. You still live in Northern Virginia. And where the heck is Waterford, Virginia?
Oh.
I don't know that.
You should know it. You should know it.
It's part of our town.
Well, it's one of the oldest towns in your town. And the fact that it's settled in 1733, it's a Quaker establishment on the other side of Leesburg. It's a whopping 80 homes big.
Is that north of Leesburg?
Just west of Leesburg, 5 miles west. I live in actually one of the newer homes, and that's 1804 in terms of its construction. That's truly the case. But it's probably best known for the Waterford Fair, the Waterford Homes Tour.
I've heard of that, absolutely, but I didn't know.
And that's gigantic. So
You're an FFV in Athens,
exactly.
First family of Virginia.
So that's something that brings out 25,000 people to this otherwise 250-person town.
And you're a commuter, obviously, but
Yep.
whatever. We say our town is Upper Marlboro, it's Vienna, now it's Waterton, it's everything within with 6 million people in what we consider our town.
Yep.
It's part of Baltimore, part of Anne Arundel County. It's still Washington, D.C.
I view it the same way, and I view that commonality, and I like the name of the town, our town. In fact, we work on that effort because we are the Washington Regional Alcohol Program, meaning that we're fighting drunk driving and underage drinking in Montgomery and Prince George's County, in the District of Columbia, Arlington, Fairfax, Loudoun, and Prince William. It's an aggregate. In fact, one of the things that we do, we actually treat it like an aggregate on a number of levels, including when we do data compilation. We're not looking at just how we're doing on drunk driving in Montgomery County or in Prince William County. It's how we're doing that collectively. We are but one unit. As Washington.
I see that at your board meeting because you have officers that serve on the board from all the jurisdiction. I think that's powerful.
Well,
that is so powerful.
And I think that it echoes the Big Tent, strategic Big Tent approach that we've longed to encompass, which is not just law enforcement representing agencies around the Beltway, but multiple disciplines.
Absolutely.
Broadcasting like yourself, but also healthcare, also the alcohol industry. They're at the table as well. So when I say Big Tent, it's not just the usual traffic safety partners and government partners, but it's the alcohol industry that we're bringing to the table, as they should be at the table to address this issue.
Absolutely. I remember when Anheuser-Busch came on board, and I think at the time it was maybe a little defensive on their part to participate rather than fight it. And then they became enthusiastic supporters because it was their oxen was going to be gored unless there was somebody addressing this problem.
That's a good point. And the fact that they actually right now are our biggest Sober Ride sponsor. Our Sober Ride program, the program that we opened up with, which is, again, a free cab ride service on various different holidays, is 100% privately paid for. We do get our fair shake of government funds, but that initiative, again, our flagship program, is 100% privately paid for, of which Anheuser-Busch is our largest sponsor amongst Volkswagen and Enterprise Rent-A-Car and AAA and so many others.
Well, I recall why there is a RAP, because I lived through it as being involved with the National Association of Broadcasters as well as WMAL. There was somewhat of a crisis certainly in our town, in our community, I think in the country, about the people ignoring the fact of what was happening with drunk driving. I know they tried it with the MAD came out of this effort and to do something about it, and SAD and all these other groups, but it was finally time for the community to raise up and say, we've got to stop this, or at least try to stop it. And that's what caused RAP to exist.
Right, and as you and I were talking about some of the players that you had on board, I was thinking about somebody like you mentioned, Jerry Sachs.
Oh my God, he was so instrumental.
Right, with the then Washington Bullets, now Washington Wizards, but
his arena,
and
they did something about it.
The Capitol Center, which they viewed as being one of the Mid-Atlantic's biggest bars in terms of having 20,000 people that could be consuming alcohol, then right on the Beltway, sending them out to a game.
3 or 4 hours of drinking sometimes.
Right. How can we mitigate that risk? especially when you had, such a high percentage of crashes that were caused by drunk drivers. Of course, that's somewhat changed. We're still light years away from, calling it mission accomplished. But the fact of the matter is there was a great initiative, and this was 1982 that we were formed for that very reason, MAD being formed 2 years earlier in 1980. So you can imagine the nucleus of how much this was an issue back then. And unfortunately, as we talked off mic, how much it still is a problem today.
That is, to me, absolutely a revelation how prevalent this is in our society. We see it every single day, and yet it goes on. Something's got to happen, but it won't.
Well, I appreciate the attention on the issue, though, because we compete now against other very valid driving concerns of distracted driving and drowsy driving and drug driving, all extremely valid concerns. But the issue of drunk driving has yet to be fully eradicated. And the fact that today in this country, almost a third of all of our traffic fatalities still involve drunk drivers. I mean, that's light years from where we were 20 years ago, but still we're losing over 10,000 people in these 100% preventable crashes in this nation. It's amazing.
There it is. There's the statistic that stands out of all over. Easy to understand how it's got to be controlled, and that is to stop drinking and driving.
Right.
I don't know when it'll ever end, and maybe it never will, but I got in trouble with our friends and your friends from the bar industry at WMAL when I used to do the editorials. One of my editorials was happy hour. We got to get rid of happy hour because it's saying that you can only be happy if you're drinking, which to me was at the time ridiculous. Happy hour was asking people to come in and drink and then go back out on the street. And so the bar owners and others and friends of mine really got upset about it. In fact, they threw me off a couple of committees because of it. But we stuck to our guns. I still think it's stupid.
Well, it's funny you should mention that because actually law enforcement have responded that I think people, if they see sobriety checkpoints, and they're done very frequently in the greater Washington area as a means to identify and apprehend drunk drivers, a number of law enforcement agencies specifically do this. They call them happy hour checkpoints. They're done at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
And they work.
They absolutely
They're stopping
worked.
people.
Oh, I had Virginia just did a sobriety checkpoint in partnership with Kentucky, and they had set it up earlier in the day, and they were making DUI arrests at 10 a.m. Drunk driving has many stereotypes in terms of it being a male-dominated crime. It is. 70% of those arrested, at least in Virginia, are men. The majority of crashes happen on the weekends. That's still the case. The majority happen at night, 7 times greater at night than during the daytime. And that everybody thinks that they've had 2 drinks. And we've staffed sobriety checkpoints, and people literally leave their car with 4 or 5 beer cans around them. Following them, they still say that they've had 2 drinks. So there's a reason to do certainly sobriety checkpoints at certain times, but it's also an educational tool in trying to prevent drunk driving and being a very highly visible and doing it at a time that people wouldn't normally expect, including happy hour.
But another thing I argued with our friends in the bar industry was doing a great job in so many areas, and I'll say that, is why in the world there was a big fight in our community about keeping open and keeping liquor open till 2 a.m. There was a fight they wanted to keep it open till 3 a.m. What happens between 12 and 2 except people drinking? I asked the bar owners. They said, well, we make profit doing that, but they're sending drunks back on the street.
It's an interesting issue in the fact that you've had certain longer hours. So, for instance, the last call in the District of Columbia is 3 a.m. There are certain times they could do it till 4 a.m., and that's inauguration week and certain holidays. It's funny that it's inauguration. By the way, that's not me making that up. It's actually in D.C. law. It's actually the ABRA code that says that they can be open until 4. But now what you're faced with is you have certain casinos, Maryland Live in Hanover, Maryland, and the new MGM complex that's going to be at National Harbor, that are going to be able to offer 24-hour alcohol service. So the very thing that started RAP back in 1982, when you had the Capitol Center on the Beltway, could be unleashing 20,000 would-be drunk drivers onto the roadway. You maybe face that now with MGM and what they're building in National Harbor. And their ability by Maryland law
to
serve 24 hours.
Stunning fact. And we're going to take a break here, Kurt, and come back and talk about late night drinking.
Let's do it.
Hi, Tony Sybil here to tell everybody about our newest restaurant over off New York Avenue. It's called Ivy City Smokehouse, 1356 Oakey Street Northeast, right next to the Heck Company warehouse. It is terrific, and we have the only seafood smoker in the District of Columbia. So when you go to your grocery stores or your delis, ask for Ivy City products. 202-529-3300 or ivycitysmokehouse.com.
Our Town with Andy Ockershausen.
This is Our Town, Andy Ockershausen. We're talking with Kurt Erickson from the Washington Regional Alcohol Program, and we were talking about what's changing in our society and what RAP has noticed and what is going on with underage drinking and what we're worried about.
Well, I mean, by all metrics, underage drinking is down at the local and national level. No matter what survey, I think the larger national survey is Monitoring the Future that's done by University of Michigan. But while that's good news, is the fact that more dangerous binge drinking, that defined as 4 or 5 drinks in one setting, is going up, which is not necessarily new. Kids, usually underage persons, are usually drinking to get drunk. But more of them are doing it, and they're doing it much more dangerous levels, including up to 10 drinks in one setting. So that's a huge concern.
Well, most of that I read about is high school and college kids. There's a certain point where they don't binge anymore, but young people seem to be the leading exponents of the binge drinking. And some parents allow that.
That is the issue.
Me.
That is, you hit the nail on the head. That's the issue, and that came up in Annapolis this year, which was Maryland. Oh, Maryland had a couple of issues. They've had almost now annual issues of teens killed in crashes, and specifically last summer was 2 Wooten High School seniors that had just graduated that were killed in a drunk driving crash, which really served as the genesis for Annapolis this year, looking to penalize parents that host underage drinking parties, because in that scenario, where those kids came from a party, the penalty, the maximum penalty was a fine of $2,500 per count, and so the father that actually hosted the underage drinking party where these kids were, and later drove and were killed, stroked a check for $5,000, and that was his entire fine. Right now, Maryland passed legislation for 2 dead people. What Maryland has since done was to increase that financial penalty, but also allow the possibility of a year in jail for the first time, hoping that that's going to be motivating. Because, again, I think parents, I think their hearts are in the right place in terms of wanting to keep their kids safe, saying, well, let's keep it under one roof and so forth, but their heads aren't. If just for the fact of the civil liability that's involved and, the impaired judgment that kids are going to have. And the 2 kids killed, by the way, weren't the driver. So they made the decision an impaired decision to get into a car of an impaired driver. So it's that impaired judgment. It's not about just driving. It's about, it's about sex. It's about violence, about unplanned sex, unplanned pregnancies, and so forth. Impaired judgment is what it's all about.
Well, the thing is that impaired is what kills me, because obviously they're impaired, but they don't know it. Right. Because the more impaired they get, the cockier they get, and I can drive. How many times in my lifetime have I heard people say, have one for the road? I mean, that was the way when I grew up. And whatever you do, take a drink with you. That's the way it was, Kurt. Now, that's all changed, thank God. But I couldn't believe I lived through that, and I managed to live. I had friends that I got stopped one time, I admit it. I was leading a Hardin Weaver golf tournament after a party, and I got stopped in Montgomery County, and I went to school. I went to driver school and learned so much. I would think driver school should be a must for every kid in high school, whether they drive or not.
But what you just said about when judgment's being impaired, which is one of the reasons that Janice was talking off mic about the importance of designating a driver or designating an exit strategy, whatever it is, before you go out.
Correct.
We're not an anti-alcohol group. We are, however, unequivocally anti-drunk driving, but we just want people to plan ahead. So whether that means planning their safe transportation home, cab, Uber, Lyft, transit, an individual taking you home, whatever it takes, but also understanding that the importance of a designated driver needs to be done ahead of time, and it's not the person in your group that had the least amount to drink, which unfortunately some people think a designated driver is. Designated driver is designating a sober driver.
Correct.
And doing it even before you go out.
Is going to be able to handle people and get them safely to wherever they're going.
Exactly right.
But Kurt, it just kills me that parents know this and still let the kids have parties and provide. If they don't provide the alcohol, they don't fix it so they can't have alcohol. and it still goes on.
Well,
Parents.
Yeah, the second leading source of alcohol for teens in this country is parents, second only to other related individuals.
That's a stunning fact.
It is daunting in terms of challenging that, but I think there's been a fair effort in Montgomery County, as just citing it as an example. That's where the legislation was generated from in terms of...
Is that that bill that you had passed that
Yes.
you got all the accolades and well-deserved, that Rapp and Kurt Erickson got this through the legislature?
It's actually the delegate that ended up getting passed is Delegate David Fraser Hidalgo from Montgomery County, who's a former police officer as well in Montgomery County.
Famous name, I know that.
Yeah, and worked with the two families that were involved, and it's really their stories that got the bill across. So it was just phenomenal. But now it's a matter of educating parents that these are the penalties, that there's a possibility of jail and 1 year in jail if you're involved in hosting a teen drinking party or certain teen drinking
It's
parties.
only in Montgomery County at this point.
No, that's a statewide law. So
Oh,
it's
how
generated
about
in Montgomery County,
What's
but it's not
happening in
statewide.
Virginia? Do they have any the same legislation?
They've got something similar to that, and I'm not sure what D.C. has right now, and the fact that all of those states have different challenges. As much as we were talking a few minutes ago about how uniform we are as a Washington metropolitan area and the 6 million populace,
Our town.
there are some differences between the states. One of the things that Maryland just did that Virginia had done back in 2012 was now to require those in-car breathalyzers if you get a DUI in that state. And by the way, it doesn't matter if it's your first or 31st drunk driving conviction. It doesn't matter your BAC level. You now have to have installed in your car those in-car breathalyzers that will prevent you from even starting your car if you've been drinking. Virginia passed that in 2012, and D.C., believe it or not, just quietly passed it, and it went into effect this month.
Well, they've kept that quiet.
They've kept it very quiet. 'Cause it has to go through federal review. So it came out of the Transportation Committee and Environment, passed unanimously, introduced actually by the mayor, but just came back from the congressional review, as all D.C. laws have to, with an October 8th. So we're going back in time, retroactive date. But that's a great thing. Technology is probably going to be the solution here. It's not a panacea, but it absolutely works in those situations when it comes to drunk driving in terms of reducing recidivism, but also reducing alcohol-related traffic fatalities.
Yeah, it's come so far thanks to Rapp and others like Rapp, MAD, SAD, and all these other things that are nationwide. And has anybody around the country adopted any of your legislative ideas for their legislature?
Oh,
you'll have a group, right? You have a national group.
Well, yeah, I think legislative ideas are for the taking. One of the things that corrals all of these ideas is the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration actually publishes, and I think all traffic safety advocates know about this, but probably the public doesn't, which is they do a publication every 2 years called Countermeasures That Work, that literally list from ignition interlocks to jail time to underage drinking penalties, what works, what doesn't work. In other words, in a peer-reviewed, scientific way, so that any group, whether it's ours or others, can promulgate that at the local level.
And this is all then digested by all the groups around the country.
Yep.
And so if there's something working very well in Connecticut, you'll hear about it here and
Absolutely.
up and down, because it's a national tragedy. It's not in our town or our state. It's the United States of America.
No, that's exactly
right. We
right.
can't solve the problem.
No, and one good point is the fact that, I think I said already that 31% of all traffic deaths in this country involve drunk drivers. The D.C. area has been consistently below that, but in 2014, they went above that mark. They're at 35%. So 35% of all local traffic deaths involve drunk drivers. Boy, that is not something to be proud of. We consider ourselves a taxi town, an Uber and Lyft town, a metro town, a high visibility. We've got Soberite here that annually takes 2,000 to 3,000 people off the roadways that were drinking. So when we now exceed the national level in a negative way, that shows that we've got work to do. It's frightening is the right word.
And even though we have problems now with the Metro system, it is still a system that helps people not to get in their automobile.
You know what? And I appreciate you saying that, because actually there's a public hearing this week, and as much as Rapp advertises with its Soberite program that we're looking at taking would-be drunk drivers home. Metro doesn't advertise that, but they do it.
Absolutely.
And so when those hours are canceled between midnight and 3 a.m., which I understand they have maintenance to do, but the fact of the matter is that can't come at a worse time in terms of addressing drunk driving issues. The majority of drunk driving crashes in Maryland happen exactly between midnight and 3 a.m. And again, there's a 7 times greater risk of being in a drunk driving crash at night than daytime. So we'll actually be talking at the hearing this week, talking about finding other times this isn't working.
Kurt, this is one of my problems I had doing editorial, to say there's no reason other than drinking to stay open after midnight. And I got in a lot of trouble with friends and so forth. And I'll come back and want to tell you about that. I don't want to repeat myself, but there is really no reason to stay open except to sell booze from midnight on.
Yep,
That's my estimation.
Which is one of the reasons when we do our Sober Right program that you've been such a supportive of over the years, that we don't just offer it till 3 a.m. to give you your example,
right.
Which is last call, the latest bar in D.C. on normal nights or normal weekend nights. And we don't do it till 4 a.m. to 5 a.m. Our Sober Right program always works till 6 a.m. So for this Halloween, till 6 a.m. Between December 16th and January 1st, till 6 a.m. And you think about that 3 hours after last call, you can still avail yourselves of a local life-saving service. I'm not too sure what else we can do to convenience the would-be drunk driver.
I don't think rap can do any of it. The public's got to do it. And we'll be right back. We'll take a break here now. It's been so great to talk about this.
This is Sonny Jorgensen. Got a confession to make. I let my wife drag me to one of those Mike Collins estate planning seminars. Like I don't have enough on my plate with a certain football team. Actually, it wasn't too bad. In fact, we both learned a whole lot about how to protect our kids and grandkids down the road and to take care of ourselves right now. So if you get one of Mike's invitations in the mail, go. I'm glad I did. Get all the information and register online at MikeCollins.com. That's MikeCollins.com.
You're listening to Our Town with Andy Ockershausen. Brought to you by Best Bark Communications.
We're talking to Kurt Erickson, the brains behind rap. I give him credit for that, and you are, Kurt. Did a fabulous job. I wonder where our group would be if it weren't for rap in the last, 34 years?
34 years exactly. So 34 years this year.
Where would we be? I mean, we'd be in bigger trouble than we're in.
Well, I don't know, but it's a team effort. There are a lot of groups fighting this issue, and it's going to take a team effort. Because, like I said, the stats that we talked about earlier, we're pushing against the tide at this point when drunk driving is actually resurging. And by the way, that's at the national and the local level. Nationally, drunk driving fatalities are up 3% last year. We've had 2 years of increasing drunk driving fatalities here in the greater Washington area. We lose a person every 4 days in these preventable crashes.
With more publicity than we've ever had.
Right.
And the word is out there, it's on the street, and it still goes on and on.
Well, and that the penalties are so great. I mean, it doesn't matter. The penalties are different in D.C., Maryland, and Virginia, but they still range from, up to a year in jail, having your license taken away for a year, $2,500 fine. We were talking off mic.
About the lawyer fees.
Right. That if you add up those fees, forget the fines. If you add up getting a lawyer for $6,000 and getting your car towed, insurance rates increases, if not being outright canceled and getting your car impounded, it's estimated that a first-time DUI, specifically in this area, is anywhere between $5,000 and $20,000.
Well, I know that. There was a group I worked with in Arlington years ago that was selling that to out. We'll be your attorney, but we're going to cost you a lot of money. This is not going to be. If you get caught for drunk driving, you're going to spend far less what you pay me. The lawyer said you're going to lose your job, or you're going to lose time at your job because your people you work for are not going to pay you for jail time or court time. So it adds up and adds up and adds. And then maybe the financial reason is going to get through these thick heads sometimes, Kurt. But I'm doubtful. I really am doubtful.
But if that doesn't work, the uniformity
keep trying something else.
Well, the uniformity right now of D.C., Maryland, and Virginia, all as of this month having the same interlock penalty, meaning that again, if you're convicted of a DUI in any of those localities, and again it's your first offense, you have to now put those devices in your car. These are the devices that you have to breathe in before you start your vehicle, actually for the vehicle to start. And by the way, it also allows you to retest. So you're going to be driving down the road and it's going to signal you to retest. It wants you to pull over. And if you fail, it's going to alternately flash your lights and beep your horn to draw attention to your vehicle. So I would like to think that the societal embarrassment of that or picking up a date and having to blow into a device before you can actually take off, if that maybe that will complement the penalties that would otherwise apply. Now,
what is the future in your eyes and the eyes of people in your profession about driverless cars?
Janice was just meant, if not that, which I think is going to be great, but you still, if you're of impaired judgment, you still have to get that car and communicate where you're going correctly and so forth. I mean, keep in mind, I think about that with like what Metro experienced a couple of years ago, where they were actually declaring that there were persons that were too drunk to even use Metro. They were falling off escalators and falling down escalators and things like that. Oh, it's absolutely true. So even though you have an autonomous way of getting home, and in that case you actually have a driver operating a train, but you don't see that driver, it's the same thing. You still need to have to plan ahead and so forth. But if it's not that technology, it's going to be technology that's going to be implemented in a car that's going to either through transdermal means or iris scans or finger button push that's going to detect the amount of alcohol that you have in your system before it allows you to operate that same vehicle.
We keep coming back to the same issue and the same problem. That is, it is a people problem. It's not a societal problem. It's people, individual problem. And what can we do, meaning the society? Just keep talking about it, I would imagine.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think the words that we're looking for, it's personal responsibility. At some point, you've got groups like us that are championing, innovative health programs that we do in area schools and workplaces to try to prevent this and being an advocate for these as registered lobbyists in D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. But at the end of the day, it does come down to personal responsibility. And for people to just realize that the costs for this are so high and the randomness of drunk driving is so great. We mentioned a NHTSA stat earlier, but the other NHTSA stat that I'd like to cite is that the U.S. Department of Transportation says that 1 out of 3 Americans will be directly impacted by drunk driving in their lives. So if you walk outside your front door, if it's not you, it's going to be your neighbor to your left or your neighbor to your right on a figurative basis. It's just so random.
And you and I, and you told me about this. So the collateral damage from a drunk driver is not the person driving or the drunk. It's the collateral, the third party. It could be somebody in the car in the back seat.
That's right.
Unrelated to what.
But you know what's interesting about that? We one thing we didn't talk about is that D.C., Maryland, and Virginia all do a campaign called Checkpoint Strike Force, which in addition to SOBRA and everything else we talked about, which is law enforcement deploying high visibility efforts to identify and apprehend drunk drivers, and RAP in Maryland and Virginia we buy ads and create messaging to try to prevent drunk driving. And we're specifically targeting the 21 to 35-year-old male audience because that's the group that's overrepresented in fatal car crashes where alcohol is a factor. And we poll that audience in addition to doing focus groups. And continually, the number one consequence that they fear in terms of getting busted for drunk driving is not societal embarrassment or not fines or jail time. It's the killing or harming of someone else. Exactly what you just said.
Is that
so it's
right?
It's not killing or harming themselves. They don't think they're going to be affected. But you know what? It's killing their girlfriend, their little brother, whomever. But it's the victimizing of someone else is what they fear the most.
That is stunning to me. Those are kind of things RAP has found out that you constantly are on top of. Incidentals to whatever your effort is. You have stats up the kazoo, which I appreciate you saying that,
but we need to because it's a cynical group. Again, 21 to 35-year-olds overrepresented. They have the highest BAC, but they're also provenly resistant to the run-of-the-mill PSA campaigns. So we can't reach them by just putting a crash car in front of them and telling them this might be you. No. We need to really hit them where it's going to resonate. In fact, our ads this last year have to do with getting a safe ride home because whereas the majority of that audience agrees that designating a driver is the best means of getting home after drinking. Well, really only about a fraction of them actually do it. And we want them to do it in advance. And again, it's not the person in the group that had the least amount to drink, but it's the designated sober driver.
Well, Kurt, I know you must feel it on your long commute every night to get home to wonderful Leesburg and Waterford, Watertown?
Waterford, you got it.
Waterford, that's Crystal. That's where
exactly right.
You're in the business, right?
That's right.
But Kurt, this is so great, and what you're doing is unbelievable, what RAP has done, and I've seen it from the ground up, and you've taken us to a new level, and please stay at it because there are not many Kurt Ericksons left. I know that because I'm around. But thank you for being here, and thank you for all you do. And like Janet says, this bud's for you, honey. He gets his earbuds, Daddy, when he leaves. His earbuds. He goes to our town.
Well, Janice and Andy, thank you for helping us get the word out. You guys have been champions of this effort, and our success is largely attributable to your support, so I appreciate it.
Good luck to you, and I'll see you Friday at the big meeting.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Kurt.
Thanks, Andy.
You've been listening to Our Town Season 1 with your host, Andy Ockershausen. New Our Town podcast episodes are released each Tuesday and Thursday. We welcome your comments and suggestions on how you like the show or who you'd like to hear from next. Catch us on Facebook at Our Town DC or visit our website at ourtowndc.com. Our special thanks to WMAL Radio in Washington, D.C. for hosting our podcasts.